I just think there's a lot to be said for leaning into life, and you don't have to. I think everyone wants to crush life and own the day and be epic, and to lean into something, you're just kind of letting life know you're there, and you don't have to push back, you don't have to be strong, you don't have to run away. You can just kind of lean into it and be, some days I'm probably going to run with it, some probably days I'm going to sit still, some probably days I'm probably going to run back. But if I can, I'm just going to lean into it, because I know if I'm leaning into it, at least I'm trying to move forward.
Hey, what's up, man?
I'm here, not much. Welcome to our podcast 335, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, man, we're a little out of sync.
I know we are. It's 335. It is Friday. Happy Friday to you today. For those of you listening in order, is January 3rd, 2020. Our first podcast of the new year. Will be, which is kind of crazy to even say out loud, our fourth year producing this podcast. We traditionally come to you twice a week, usually on Mondays and Thursdays, but when we have holidays or travel or other of some of life's circumstances, we tend to shift things around, but we've committed to, since day one, to bringing you 2 podcasts a week, and we have been consistent with that since day one. And while we are labeled as, and I think people promote us more as a triathlon podcast, we cover it all. We talk about training, everything, swim, bike, run, races, race recaps, even interviews with race directors, the occasional guest from all kinds of realms of kind of the wellness and endurance sports industry. But most of the time, it's just Mike and I as coaches, and both of us are coaches and athletes, having a talk, chatting about life and where we are with endurance sports and how the training and life, they intersect. How it can complement each other and bring us joy and fulfill us in a lot of ways. And then sometimes the difficult balancing act that we often have as triathletes, type A people, and just navigating the different seasons of life that we're in with everything that life kind of has to throw at us. And we do our best to communicate that in a very open and honest kind of just conversation. There's no ads, no sponsors, no plugins. It's just us having a chat. And so if, every podcast is different. We cover it all. Sometimes they're more technical and more, specific towards certain types of training, some bike around. But a lot of times it covers, the emotional, mental, and sometimes spiritual side of training, and then life. It's interesting that our podcast is, promoted and probably labeled and categorized as a triathlon podcast, but some of the, most I guess personal feedback that we get, emails and on iTunes reviews and our closed Facebook group, are from the ones that kind of talk about life and then kind of sprinkle in triathlon with it, which is, I think, for most of us how life should be anyway. It's living life and doing the best we can and then sprinkling triathlon in it. So if it's your first time listening and you're expecting a steps 1 through 10 of how to improve your bike cadence for Olympic distance triathlon, this is not that podcast. This isn't this episode, at least. And so, if you find yourself kind of wondering what's going on, dive in. We have a full archive of, again, 334 podcasts to go back into. So check out the subjects, check out the descriptions. Mike always does a really good job of kind of highlighting the things that we talk about in each specific podcast. And while this one might not be for you, I can promise you some of them are. So pick and choose, go back and forth, start at 1, go all the way through this one, or start from here and go backwards. Whatever floats your boat. We're just appreciative that you've taken the time to give us a shot and are listening today.
Yeah, man. It's I think a lot of it is about over time, a lot of people have actually really gotten to know us well, and obviously, and a lot of our listenership, we get to meet people through camps and at races and things like that. So it becomes sort of a evolution of what we're going through too, on some level, and what the times of the year, and like the obstacles people face with training in certain periods or what have you, off season, beginning of the, obviously we're turning the year now and we're going back into it, man, and it's going to be full on. So we're turning a new decade.
That's right. People said that, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's true. And I don't even like. People were doing like their decade, summaries, or like, when people put like these picture collages of like 2010 to like 20 into the decade. I'm like, listen, there is very, very little of the early part of that decade that I even want to like go into. I am definitely negative split the decade, but it's a new decade, and it's just a new day. And I think I'm not a big New Year's resolution person. I like the feeling of optimism that I think is contagious to so many people, athletes, triathletes. It's funny. Like January 1st, my inbox went like ballistic, with new thoughts and ideas and goals and races and changes. I'm like, for most of us, you're pretty all right. You're doing pretty good. And I think that, I'm not a huge fan of trying to make like gigantic, drastic changes because those are super hard. I think that if you just try to, choose to do certain things a little bit more, or choose to do certain things a little bit less, you're usually going to kind of find yourself in the right direction. But I do love the optimism. It's kind of like it's interesting that it's just a date on the calendar. It is. I find it. It's like the Monday times 500. Is January 1st. It's a new year. It's a new you. It's all about this year, and I'm going to do it. And I do love that part of the optimism that it gives people, and the hope that it gives people. And hopefully it continues on, and everyone's able to achieve all the things they want to achieve this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and face it, with the holidays, we can talk about just. It's a new day or whatever, but I think everybody sort of falls back a little bit during the holidays, and it's just a real tough time of year to keep it going. And so yeah, we just turned the corner, and now the calendar seems like it's cleared up, and we're full steam ahead. It's time to get back into the groove. And the holidays can be tough as they are, and of course this has been a rough start to my new year, buddy.
I kind of want to give you the floor for a second. I know that it's been a rough past, probably a past few months, and obviously a rough past week. But as you said, we have gotten, and I think sometimes I forget that, is we do this podcast twice. We've done it for going on 4 years now. We probably don't take into consideration the fact that people kind of pop in as new listeners and like, what the hell are these guys talking about?
Yeah.
And who are they, where are they going with this? And is this podcast even relevant? And do you guys even have a purpose? Which is, one of my favorite glowing iTunes reviews. But we do. We've become good friends, with so many people that have listened to our podcast. Like you said, it's at so many races that we've met, and just as you can now connect online and connect remotely, either with the athletes that we work with. We've had hundreds of athletes come through our camps, and we have a run camp coming up. We'll have 40 people at, where you spend 24 hours together. And so it is. I think we forget that, but it's also, I think, as I was kind of reminiscing this morning about where we've been, and then obviously probably the direction of the podcast today, is that we get so many emails about people trying to get us to, or encouraging us to try and create revenue through the podcast with sponsorships and, better search engines, and doing this and capitalizing on, like I think you texted me on, I think Monday you said was our highest download day ever. But I was thinking, I was like, I don't think, even if, at some point down the road, if we ever even did that I can't fathom a dollar amount that would equate to how I've been personally enriched by this podcast, and the people that we've met, and the connections that we've made. And I think just the commitment that you and I both had to producing this consistently for what is going on now, our 4th year, 335 podcasts twice a week without missing. And just the people that we've met, and then just the open dialogue that I think is often one of the most undervalued pieces of connection these days, is just being able to have an opportunity to sit down and talk with a person that you care about. You and I are best friends, and we get to talk twice a week for an hour. And I think people forget that most people don't get to do that. And the people that we've met, and the feedback and the emails that we've hopefully, and I think obviously for some people, had a really positive impact on. But that's also why I love it, is that we do talk about triathlon, but we talk about life, and I've been reminded the last few days last few weeks. I think I even mentioned in a couple podcasts ago just about how hard life is, and then that was, I guess, probably the direction that you've been on here the last few days.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's I haven't really talked about it much. I've just kind of been going through it. But there, I do want to get one thing out of the way, because there's a lot of people that in our close Facebook group. If you search Crushing Iron Group, you can come in there. But of course, my Badgers. Everybody knows I'm a big Badger fan. We had a tough day at the Rose Bowl. Kind of fumbled away that game basically, and so that was tough. But what really probably made that ultra tough for me, and it was weird because I felt bad about it, but I think I ultimately felt worse about it because of my relationship with my father, and he passed away on New Year's Eve, and he'd been asking about that game. I was up there all week, and he wanted to watch it, but he was kind of losing steam, and I knew he was in and out of sleep. I mean, I'd been going through this for a couple months. He'd been dealing with a lot of health issues, and was more or less in hospice care the last 2 months of his life. And I got to be honest, I didn't really, I'd heard about hospice, and you kind of know what it is, but it's sort of a little bit different, or it's branched out a little bit these days, I think, where people, I always thought a hospice was all she wrote,
right.
The final week, somebody'd come in and just, it was all that. But when 2 months ago, the doctor kind of took him off he was on some chemo medication that was really disrupting his body, and that was a tough time for me. I'm not really into all that stuff. I'm very holistic in a lot of ways and believe in different things, but you learn, and you have to accept what people go through. But anyway, he was more or less pulled off the chemo, and they had went through this discussion about whether or not he thought hospice was the right decision, because once you go into that, then you kind of forfeit medical care and things like that. So you go one way or the other, and he was in that, and he was pretty good a couple months ago. I went up there, and we had a lot of really good conversation. He was pretty lucid, and had remembered a lot of old stories, and he didn't seem bad at all. But this time I went up and I saw him really faltering, and I guess the day, I was in this kind of flux as to, because I was going to come back here, and because the doctor said, this could be a couple weeks, it could be several months, and that was sort of the indication that he kept giving, was that he would bounce back. And that Sunday he had a good buddy over, and he seemed kind of fine. And then Monday was when I was like, well, I could stay here, but I don't know how long this is going to last, right? So I decided that I was going to leave Monday. So I thought, well, I did feel like he was fading, but I also felt like he could rally, and maybe in a couple of weeks I'd go back. But I didn't want to just keep staying one more day, I guess. And
right.
So back to the New Year's Eve, or the New Year's resolutions and things like that. I'm not really into that either. But through this process, I kind of developed sort of a new, I guess, habit or hope for my new year, and I basically just came up with lean into it. And because it was tough to actually see him that way, and it's the easy thing to do sometimes when things get rough, is to kind of pull back and avoid things and stuff like this. And it really became a good lesson for me to just embrace it and lean into it, and I really did, and sat with him for many hours, just by his side. And on Monday, it was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. Was I decided I was going to leave, and I knew in my mind that it could possibly be the last time that I ever saw him, right? So I sat in a chair by his bed, and he was sleeping, and it was very difficult to walk over there and say I was leaving. And I finally walked over, and he was in a hospital bed in the house with my mom, and I reached over and grabbed his arm and pulled onto his hand and put it back up on the bed, and he woke up, and I said, hey Dad, I just want to let you know I got to go back to Nashville. And he said, "Oh no, why are you leaving?" And that was, of course, was my biggest fear.
Right.
And I said, "Well, there's things I got to do." And I said, I'll try to get back soon. Hang in there. I'll try to be back. And he goes, I'll hang in there. And I said, and I leaned in. I told him I loved him, and he told me he loved me. And we hugged, and that was it. So it was. I'm really at peace with how that went, because you just never know, right? How that moment.
If you ever get to say goodbye.
Right. A lot of people don't. So I was real fortunate about that. And of course, the next day was New Year's Eve, and I was back here and went out to this thing for a little while. I was back home by like 7:30. And I was just laying in bed reading, and my mom called about 11 o'clock, and he passed away that night. So that's that. That's what I've been going through. And I think that I know, again, here we go, this triathlon podcast, but I just,
I mean, it's a life.
It's more important to us. That's why we started this podcast, was, like you said, to have conversations, and it was something we enjoyed doing, and we haven't really wavered on that. We just, we think things are important. We're always trying to be better people and understand life and things like that, and I think that's really what this podcast is all about, and what we're all about. And if there's any bigger lesson than this one, please let me know, because one thing I've kind of come away with was being so close to something like this. You are what you sort of expose yourself to, right? Or what the things that you do in life. And definitely when you're younger, you fear death, and it seems like the scariest thing ever. But I think part of our goal in life and the meaning of life is to understand death and not be afraid of it, so you can live. And I think that was one of the biggest things that I learned with this, because I basically stared death in the eye for several weeks, and it just, for lack of a better word, became more familiar and less daunting. So I think going into this year, I have a little bit of a different perspective, because your parent only dies once, and this is something you go through, and everybody goes through it. So it's been a crazy ride, but I'm glad he went peacefully, basically in his sleep. And my mom has been unbelievable, and I send prayers out to her, and I love her, and she's been, a lot of times they say it's tougher for the whoever's not going through it, and and I get that. I saw a lot of stuff she went through, so it's sad, it's tough, but it happens, and here we are.
Yeah, I've got a million thoughts about that in different directions, and don't expect to segue into how do you apply that to your swim mechanics. I was as we kind of go over this podcast and why we started it, and there was it's funny because most of the people that leave us, that a lot of people that will really don't like our podcast, make sure they leave us reviews on iTunes. And Rebecca Haynes said something on our closed Facebook group. Again, you can hop in on Facebook and search Coaching Iron Group, and she said, "Hey Mike and Robbie, I just want to let you know that you guys are awesome. You've changed my attitude, not just triathlon, but to life. Your passion is infectious, and after listening to your podcast, I'm actually excited about training." And then she went on to say a few other things. But, as we've done this podcast, and I think as a coach, triathlon is important to your athletes. But as a coach, if the only thing that you leave them with is faster times, then you've failed. And that's a lot of how I've always hoped, and I've been happy and so pleased with the direction of our podcast, is that we've always kind of stayed true to ourselves. And while it might not be the best rated podcast on the planet, why it might not be everyone's Kona go-to podcast or how to get quicker in 10 days podcast, I genuinely feel like it has helped people, and I truly believe that in a lot of ways it has helped people in more than triathlon. And I think you and I both started this podcast to help ourselves, and I was thinking about that as especially these last few days. We had some friends come in from Iowa who we became really close with in Kansas City, and one of the Kara that was a Kara and David and their daughter Emma. We've grown really close, and she actually worked for me when I was working at Iron Tribe back in Kansas City, and we started this podcast. And I remember I'd go into my office in some of the very beginning podcasts and like do it on my lunch break. And I think sometimes you can even hear like the weights in the background and and why it like drove you crazy because you were like, we got to make this clean and clear. And
I can't wait till next week when you're in Disney World.
I know, right? Well, no, we're gonna take care of that. Okay. But yeah, I'm done with the stairwell, like the outside stairwell. It's just, but we've done it for ourselves. I mean, we've obviously done it in a fashion that hopefully it has produced, and I know it has positive results for people both on the race course. But what's really like just risen to the top of me in the last week or so is the ability and the willingness to share and communicate some of the most difficult things in life are in a lot of ways the ways that you were able to gain the most. And like if you think about it, like you were at a place where you felt like, because I mean, as far as I know you haven't really shared your dad's passing very publicly, but you just shared it with thousands of people on a podcast that are free to judge you for whatever, or why isn't this a triathlon, and just the freedom that gives you, I think, and to say things out loud. And I think we've gotten so addicted in a world to where we don't have to say things out loud, that saying it in a text is just all we need, or saying it in an email, or basically just not saying it all. Mm-hmm. And that the power that can be in. And I was thinking about the things that I say and how my actions are on the podcast, and how someday, like Hayden, if the podcast still exists, that Hayden would be able to go back and like listen to these podcasts and the things that I say about him and the message that we're trying to send, and that if this podcast is only helping people get faster, and there is no higher purpose, or and not even just on a spiritual, just as if it's not bettering you as a person and opening up different opportunities and different mindset and different ways to feel positive and hopeful about the direction that you're headed, because most of us gravitate towards this thing called triathlon or any endurance sports because we're looking for something to grab onto. I think the term like hanging on is appropriate for so many people, because they're hanging on either by a thread, or they're trying to hang on and grab for something else. And I think that when we do that, we give ourselves hope. Just like this time of year, we give ourselves hope. It's a new year. Going through something that you just gone through this last week, and will continue to go through the next couple of days, I know is hard. And if you don't, and I think I love what you said about just leaning into it, in that most things in life we try to run away from, or we try to ignore, and we try to I mean, I lived that before I got sober. I tried to run away and drown my thoughts and my feelings and my sorrows in the bottom of a bottle. And the more I've talked about it, and Alcoholics Anonymous is supposed to be what is an anonymous thing. Like, people always ask why are you so open about it, and I feel like it helps me stay sober. I keep thinking it helps me in my state of mind and continue on the path that I hopefully am on. And I think just leaning into things in general is, you don't have to. I just think there's a lot to be said for leaning into life, and you don't have to. I think everyone wants to crush life and own the day and be epic, and to lean into something, you're just kind of letting life know you're there. And you don't have to push back. You don't have to be strong. You don't have to run away. You can just kind of lean into it and be, some days I'm probably going to run with it. Some probably days I'm going to sit still. Some probably days I'm probably going to run back. But if I can, I'm just going to lean into it, because I know if I'm leaning into it, at least I'm trying to move forward. And I'm not trying to take steps backwards. I'm not ignoring the obvious. And I'm not trying to pretend that things are great. And when you sent me that text message, I was obviously, you and I have talked about it for the last few months, and I think I talked about this on our previous podcast, of just how many people, like, when you read through Training Peaks comments, it's it brings you a different level of awareness about how hard life is. You've got, you're my best friend. Your dad passed away, and you have athletes that are getting cancer diagnosis, or that have just, another athlete lost their parent, or lost a friend, or kids in the hospital, and or going through divorce. And you hear that and you see it and you think, just like, but yet they're making time to do these things that they want so much to help heal them, to help propel them to this new version of you. And I think there's this hope that comes with any type of fitness. Whether you're hopping on the treadmill, or you're picking up a weight, or you're going to your first spin class, you're hopping in the pool. It's scary, but there's just this opportunistic hope. I think that it gives all of us to amidst life's chaos, amidst life, unfortunate obstacles and circumstances and loss, that we can somehow, in some way, and we can't always do this because sometimes it's just impossible. You can't always have the energy and be motivated enough. It's not even motivation. Sometimes you just have the energy to take care of yourself enough to get out and do these things. But when you take the time and you do it, that I think you're showing yourself that it's just a glimpse into things that you can achieve. It's a glimpse into things that you can do. Even, there have been times that I've outside of the pool. I think there have been numerous times where I know I've worked through some of the hardest parts of my life while I was running or while I was on my bike and shed tears. I don't know.
Yeah.
It is a cleansing, powerful feeling to be able to do these things. And I know I do. I take them for granted sometimes, the opportunities that we have each day. And that while I am all for gaining, and it's my job, as a coach, it's to, help people perform better. But, and that's important. But I think the biggest focus is, and we talk about this a lot, is that, you shouldn't want to miss out on the opportunities, to do things, or to not do a workout and do something with your family, or to get something out of a workout that you can't put on paper, and to get something out of it that's a great experience. And I think that what we do as triathletes, or anybody in endurance sports, whether you're just swimming or cycling or running, or you're just waiting to do any of it, is to just lean, like you said, just lean into it. It's never going to be great, and sometimes it's going to flat out suck, just like your seasons in life will. And there's always lessons. That's why we'll never end up in running out of topics, because there's lessons. There's lessons in everything we go through. There's lessons in loss. There's lessons in triathlon, in how we shape things. And I do have to say, you're talking about your mom. She was, definitely send your love to Mike, but definitely send it to his mom. His mom is a one of a kind. She was one of the very few people as well that was there for me in some of the darkest, most difficult times in my life. And so I've always loved seeing her, because she's acts like she's hadn't seen me in like 10 years every time I see her, and then asks me why you're taking so long on the bike and why you haven't gotten back yet.
Because he's pacing it. He's not going to cook it today.
I know. He's
yeah, right.
That's always, where is he? What time do you think he's going to be in, Robbie? What time? But no, I think, there's a many different directions you can go with it. And, I think that, I think it's a great conversation to have about leaning into things and just being open and communicating, because you can never truly help somebody unless you know. And and I think just the power of sharing and thinking through things, even the difficult things, like you've said, is I think it's a positive thing, even though it's definitely not the greatest of circumstances. But hopefully it brings you into the new year with like you said, you don't have to have some like list top 10 things you need to do to change your life now that this has happened. A lot of times it's just like you said, leaning in and keep your feet moving. Just don't stop.
Yeah, man. I think at the core of it, the message or the goal behind this podcast is, we've always said, we've been using that term, play triathlon, and we get to play triathlon, And, it is. It's just a game, man. But that doesn't mean you can't be sincere about it, right? That doesn't mean it can't be important to you, but it can't be everything. It's like, don't take it so seriously. And the reason I say that is because I think there's power in not taking things too seriously. We get into these traps of overthinking. And I think thinking might be one of the biggest problems we have today, is that, and I can speak firsthand on that, is you start thinking about stuff and you overthink it, and then you become, stagnant and paralyzed because you really try to you optimize every decision when there's a million variables in everything. And no matter how much you try to plan ahead and make everything perfect, the odds of it not being perfect are pretty damn high. So it's really
there's almost a perfect chance of it being imperfect.
Exactly. So it's sort of, that's why back to this lean into it thing. I mean, it's like I sat in that chair and tried to perfect this whole thing with my dad, and it just happened. It wasn't that. So I think it's really important when I think about triathlon too, because the freer you are, like the more have fun we're having on the course, and the more I just think you're apt to perform better too. And I think that translates into training and workouts and everything. It's like, I've just always been an anti numbers guy in a lot of ways, and I think that might be why. I'm not against statistics per se, but like it's sort of it kind of rubs me a little bit, I think, when people get too deep into it, because you're trying to, it's like with analytics and stuff like that, when the chips are down, who's most relaxed, who wants the ball hit to them, who's going to step up to the plate and be in the groove and not have all that crap on their head and perform, and I just think it really translates to the course. You can sit there and try to plot out every little thing, and you've talked about it a million times. It's like there are thousands of decisions you have to make on that course that day, and to try to predict those decisions is like a crazy feat. So just kind of go through it and accept things in training and get comfortable with situations, and know that you have the confidence to react and make the best decision available. And I think there's so much to be said for being free and having a good time and enjoying the process. And I think, to me, ultimately that translates into better performance. We can get just stuck in the minutia of, wait, this workout, I screwed up like 15 seconds to this interval. Should I do it again or whatever?
Right.
It's like, just go. Just go
should
forward,
I go back to the pool? I missed the cool down. No, you should not, in fact, go back to the cool. And
if you feel good in the pool, just like every once in a while, go after it, And again, I can't overemphasize enough, I think, because like, I do coach some people. I've been coaching on and off a little bit this whole year, and the big thing is like, there's a lot of, and you talk about it all the time, the biggest problem comes from running usually, and it's a running injury or niggle or some, that seems to be the crux of most of the setbacks in training is running. And I think so much of that comes down to preparing yourself to run, whether it be warming up and little things like, taking it easy out of the gate, and, just let your body emerge. I was talking to Phil last night, bless his heart. We had a good conversation.
Bless his heart.
He went through something similar, so he reached out to me. Identical, really, the more we talked about it. But, we were talking about this, and like how, I haven't been training a whole lot, but, if you've been through the gamut and done a bunch of triathlons, you know how to do it now. You know the mental side of it. You have the confidence, or you should, about being able to complete, whatever the distance has been. If you've done them before, you know that mentally. So that's like a huge hurdle out of your way. And while I feel like I'm not in great shape right now, I feel like I could probably go out and maybe execute a half, just based on confidence and the fact that I'm sort of rested, but like to get to, I don't know, man, like how far do you drill down into that perfectionism?
Well, I think that think that what we've and I was thinking about this last week as people were asking questions about, different metrics and training peaks and what's required and what you have to have, and it just got me thinking, like, being familiar with something, as a lot of athletes feel like they're familiar with training peaks, like that's the only way to get better, that's the only thing that exists, and if it's not in there, it doesn't matter, and it's not on Strava, it doesn't matter, and you forget that, I don't know, every other athlete on the planet trained without it about 8 years ago and did pretty awesome, or that, a lot of professionals don't use it, and and Olympic swimmers and collegiate swimmers or any year-round swimmer never use a heart rate monitor in the pool ever. And I think it brought up this feeling I was in a lot of areas that, just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's necessary. And I think we've become all too addicted to making these additions, these wants, because like the perfect example is, today is January 3rd, or January 1st, I open up Training Peaks and everybody has peak performance medals because it's your first damn day of the year. And everybody was shattering records, fastest 100, fastest 400, fastest 800, fastest half mile, fastest 5K. I'm like, dear God. And the thing is that now because what it does, none of those are necessary, zero. But what it does is it feeds into our addiction of wanting affirmation via what this tells me I'm doing, not what I feel like I'm doing or what I'm getting out of it. And now for the rest of the year, you're going to go back and think, oh, today was your third fastest, 800 meter of the year. And then you look back, or some people probably don't do this, but you look back and you find, oh, it was actually downhill the whole time. Does that make a difference? Yes, it makes a gigantic difference. But it just gives you more things to be addicted to, but then you become familiar with it. So if you're familiar with it, you feel like it's a necessity, that is part of your life, that you have to have it in order to get better, you have to have it to be fulfilled, and you have to have it to be able to perform the best that you can, and that because that's all you know. But like when you get down to it, you can be incredibly successful both as an athlete and a person, just trimming the fat away and just taking the stuff that's the most important, because when you trim the fat away and you get rid of all the noise, what you're left with is almost oftentimes always the things that matter most. And what those things do is they don't talk to you in a negative way like a workout might. If you're looking for an immediate gratification, or you're trying to meet an expectation or a certain metric, that it's not going to like if you leave your workouts and you are so upset and you are so devastated, then things are wrong. Things are wrong. You're doing it wrong. Your mindset has shifted way too hard. You need to be brought back into why you do this, and they're supposed to be. Can you be sometimes disappointed? You can if you want to, but I don't know the last time that I've ever disappointed with a workout, because I don't go into them with this expectation of you go into with execution and effort. That's it. The things you can control. And then if that's all you're doing, then you can control those things. Then what you can also control usually is where you're going to race. And because I got to this point as I was thinking about, we're going to go to Disney next week, and I'm going to do the Dopey Challenge with my wife, which is a 5K on Thursday, a 10K on Friday, a half marathon on Saturday, and then a full marathon on Sunday. And I got to thinking, I know, it's like so stupid. Like, listen, my wife puts up with a lot of stuff, okay? Like, she puts up with a lot. And it is going to be our first vacation without a kid that's not, like, work-related for me. Are we both running? Sure, but, like, the only times we've been kid-free on a vacation has been at run camp. And so we're going to go have a good time, see what goes after. But I was thinking, like, all right, how are you going to, like, pace this? Because this is, like, no easy feat. This is, like, 50 miles a week. It's not very Disney. And I was thinking, all right, dude, I was like, you got to be smart, because you don't want to be shelled, because there's this trail race here in Chattanooga I want to do the next weekend. And so I was thinking about how I'm going to pace it through all of them, and like what my ultimate goal is. My ultimate goal to race one of the four distances, and if I do, is that really smart, or is it just to execute them well so that it sets me up for success later down the road for the course of the year? And that just got to me thinking, is that, like, when you look at races as a execution, you're practicing so much patience that most people don't have. They get into races and it's fun, I think, to race a lot because you can just say you raced. I raced this last weekend. It went poorly or it went well. But if you go into an event aiming to just execute, there's also this level of not really expectation, but there's this level of focus you need to have because you have to adhere to something so strictly. Then if it doesn't work out, then you have something finite to kind of go back to and then reassess. But if you just kind of go out and you just kind of do it, then it's much easier to blame, in my opinion, if things go poorly. I just went and raced and this just didn't go well. Then you're kind of left to go back to the drawing board. But to go back to what you're saying about just training and getting back and getting in touch with your body and not always going by feel, because I think there's a lot to be said for also having targets. Is just that the ultimate decision maker and the ultimate governor should be you and your brain and your feeling and how you're assessing your body. And if you can't assess your body or you're very poor at doing it, you need to take the time to desensitize yourself to being a programmed robot and to get in touch with who you are and what feels good and what doesn't feel good. Because the more you can do that, the more successful you're going to be anyway when you race, especially in long course racing, because everything is going to change. You have to listen to your body, because if you don't and you force feed yourself a goal or a pace or a watt range or even a heart rate and your body isn't up to the task that day, because as you said, life is full of surprises, life is full of changes, and nothing is ever perfect, then you may be able to get away with it in like a sprint or an Olympic because it's going to be over soon. But you make that bad call and you force feed yourself on a 70.3 or a full, and guess what happens? You are going to have a very, very, very long day. And you'll get little to no information on how your training went via the race. You'll have to go back and dig through just your training. So yeah, it is. It's always a great time to get in touch with yourself, and it's always a great time to figure things out and run by feel and don't look at your watch or don't be obsessed with everything. Or if you are looking at your numbers, because they are important to look at in specific workouts, just not all the time, I have to like write this out sometimes when I do a workout. It's like when I give like a very wide range, is to say like honor what your body is telling you today and respect that. Don't just treat it like a freaking carnival and just do whatever you want to with it just because you have to have it today. You have to go fast today. My legs told me they had it. They just wanted to go. Okay, first of all, that's a lie. Your mind told you needed it and you had to have it for some reason that you failed to mention. Whether it was ego or having a bad day, but you needed it, not your legs. Your legs didn't need it. Your legs don't wake up and be like, hey, can you please go torch me to death on a 10K today? They don't ever say that. They're usually like, hey, can we prop our feet up on the couch and like watch football all day? So just listen and respect your body. And I think when you respect your body and respect what it's telling you, and you're opening those channels to have those conversations, and that's when you can really perform well, because it's a relationship. It's not a dictatorship. And too many people treat the relationship with their body like a dictatorship, like you do what I tell you to do, versus it's a give and take. Your body, you should both listen to each other, and that's how, again, going back to communication, like we talked about in the beginning, it's about communication and listening. If you're not listening to your body, you're not communicating with it, your mind and your body, and what's good and what's bad and what doesn't feel good, and when to lay off and when to walk, or when to take things easier, or when to take a day off, or when you're getting sick, then eventually at some point you're going to butt heads so much that something's going to break. And going back to running, like you were talking about, that's like one of the biggest things. I just had to run hard today, or had to run 45 minutes longer, and now you have to take a week off because you dug yourself too big of a hole.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. How many athletes do you know that are, once you're in the sport a while, that are really good at the idea of slowing down? I mean, like a lot of people, run slow is so hard. You hear that all the time. So that's another thing I've been kind of thinking about I've been thinking about it a while, actually. That's where my walk-run strategy kind of has come in. But I'm actually practicing this concept of pulling back. And I don't think sometimes I think it's one of those things where we have to practice it, actually, because it's not easy, especially in races, right? And I love what, you always talk about this. People don't understand, especially in a full, the concept of oftentimes the best way to go faster is to slow down. or to finish faster is to slow down in a race. And that's pacing. That's like listening to your body. That's understanding what you've got in there, what kind of juice you got left, and really not taking it over the edge too soon and all that stuff. And that takes a lot of practice for me. I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but
and patience.
Patience is that,
because sometimes you can't read your body.
Patience. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's the other thing. You get kind of, man, I do feel good today. It's mile 2, and I got to go. But it's just like, so I think about that sort of stuff, and I work at it, man, just because it's so. There's something about training. There's something about going for a run that always sneaks into my head anyway. It's sort of like, well, yeah, this is a slow run, but it's got to be my fastest slow run.
That's
you know what I mean?
That's right.
Like, I don't want to regress. I want to go slow, and I want to take it easy and work on this and just, treat my body right. But I want some kind of tangible win here. And I think that goes for every workout, whether you're in the pool or on the bike, and you're supposed to be taking an easy day, but you just don't want to, it's a 3-hour easy ride or something like that, and you're going X amount of miles, and you just do not want that easy ride, because last week you did it in 2:59, and this week you just don't want that thing to be 3:08 or something like that. It's like, man, I'm getting worse. And
there's opportunities for wins in everything we do, and your first win should always be, did I do it? And if you did it and it fell within the integrity of the plan you're trying to execute, that is part of a bigger picture, then that's all you need to know, that it's a win. That there's not this specific metric that you have to hit for every single pace range every single time, because you cannot predict that. You cannot predict how you're going to wake up, how your body is going to respond every single day. And like a great thing to do to figure out how you're in tune with your body is if you're head out for a run, and or we'll start from the beginning, like head out, do 100, a couple hundreds warm up from the swim, and then time yourself on 100 and guess your time before you look at your watch, and then see how far off you are. You should be fairly close. Same thing on the bike. If you're doing intervals, I used to get into the practice of I would warm up without at all looking at my watch or at my Garmin, and I think it was like an Edge 520. Is that I would pedal, and then before I started intervals, I would guess. All right, right now I'm probably doing 165, 170. I'm probably averaging like 155, 160 right now, and then just see how far off. And if I'm feeling really good, then it was like 180, and I'm like, all right, I'm actually my RP is low today and power is high, so this should be a good session. I can be optimistic about it. But if it was like 130s and my RPE was telling me it should be like 167, then I'm saying, all right, RPE is high, rate of perceived exertion is high for a lower output, which means I need to be very, very careful how I progress through these intervals. And if I had like 10 intervals, the first one is going to be the easiest, or I'm going to put out the lowest output, because I'm trying to see if my body even has anything. Because the way you should go about it is test yourself. I like to even try negative split intervals. Your first one shouldn't be your biggest power put. Your last one hopefully is, because at least now you've executed all 10 versus 1 and 2 going out and just doing whatever you can and then blowing up in the last 8 are basically they're useless. Or in running, head out the door, and before when your watch clicks off its first mile, guess, because most of us do like the exact same route, coming from your house each for the first mile, and guess what the pace you're doing. And again, the same thing goes. If your RP is low and your pace is fast, and obviously you're feeling good, that you can maybe let it rip if you have intervals, and be optimistic and have some fun and be encouraged. Or the other side is same with the bike, is if your RP is high and your pace is slower than you thought, then it's time to be very, very careful. It's not time to force feed yourself. It's not time to force yourself into a pace. And it might even be time to reassess the session itself, because you can either go for the big win and think, I got to do this interval workout today, or if you're a smart, patient, objective athlete, you can say, today's not the day. Instead of doing, a 60-minute run with intervals in the middle, I'm just going to run very, very easy for maybe 45 to 50, and then if I want to finish at 60, I can. But I'm going to live to fight another day knowing that my body needs recovery, and hopefully this run is going to make me into a, or it's going to make me more able to complete the session I need to tomorrow. That's how you should do it. But most athletes will say, all right, I feel like crap, but I've still got to do this today. And they force feed it, and they end up having a very terrible session, and they've dug themselves a bigger hole, and they wake up the next day thinking, I need a day off, or there's no way I can complete either today's session or the next. And so there's a lot. And again, like, I'm not saying it's easy, as our podcast has become famous for. Nothing we're going to tell you is easy, but it's something that takes practice to get to know your body and what it's doing and what it's telling you. But in order to do that, you have to listen, and you have to pay attention, and you have to be open to the feedback that it's giving you, not ignoring it, obsessed with a number, because that's when people blow up. I always kind of chuckle when people say they blow up here. I'm like, that means you just basically ignored all the warning signs. It's like so your check engine light's been on for 6 months and you're shocked that your car broke down. All right. Like that's basically what athletes do when they say, I don't know, man, I bonked or I blew up. I'm like, that what you're telling me is you just basically ignored all the warning signs of slow down, take care of your body, cool yourself, lower the power, conserve heart rate, walk the aid stations, do whatever you need to do, catch up on nutrition, do whatever. You ignored all those signs for the sake of feeling confident in the moment. And now you're feeling less confident as you walk the last 8 miles of your 70.3. There's just, don't ignore those signs. There are signs, but again, you have to get used to those signals and aware of those signals, what those signals are. It's like any other relationship you have with another person or a significant other or a spouse. It's like it takes time to get to know what those signs are. If you text your wife and you're like, hey, how's your day going? She's like, fine. You're like, oh, crap. Things are not well. Things are not good. I need to prepare myself. I need to go get flowers. I need to get a greeting card. I need to buy chocolates. I don't know what I've done, but I didn't do something good, so I need to be ready. I need to be ready. Put the apron on and cook some food. It just takes time to listen, but always listen and be open, because as you try and listen and communicate with your body, the same goes for communicating with people. If you are open and you are honest and willing, you're always going to find somebody who is going to reciprocate those same thoughts and feelings and be able to listen and give you the feedback that you need, to give you the support that you really, really need, and hopefully put you in a better place to continue doing what you want to do or help you through a difficult time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's all I got, man, today. I think that's all we should have.
That's fine. Yeah.
That's fine. Unless you want to go in the top 5 reasons why, the Tennessee Vols are back from the dead.
Did they win last night?
They did.
Big?
A comeback. We were down 13 with 9 or 13 minutes to go or maybe 6 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. And we scored. We got an onside kick and scored again. We won 23-22.
Oh. Wait, who did you play again? I'm sorry.
We played Indiana. I mean, it's not like I know. Come on, listen, dude. We're looking like I said a few minutes ago. A win is a win, and you can always find a win no matter what. But it was Indiana.
They have a pretty good offense. You guys, at least your defense must have showed pretty well.
Yeah, we still have a lot of work to do. But hey, we finished the year winning, I think 6 of 7 or 7 of 8. Definitely a better start. Got a good group of kids. It looks like. But anyway,
that's good. Well. Yeah. I'd just like to say one more thing about my dad, if I may.
Of course.
I think it's just an interesting life lesson to me. My dad was kind of a carefree guy, liked to have fun and make sure everybody was having a good time and stuff like that. That was sort of his go with the flow mentality. That's really how he was. There was he was very interested in a lot of things like business and things like that, but he was almost vicariously living through that. I was kind of just trying to nutshell his life, and he really was about entertaining people and kind of making sure everybody was having a good time wherever he was. And that was the story. Those are the stories I keep hearing, even from my friends. My friends really, a lot of them had tight relationships with him, and it was sometimes it's almost seemed like they'd rather be hanging around him than me, but it's like So, but I was going to reflect on one thing. A while back, maybe 20 years ago or so, and I've always sort of been an entrepreneur kind of guy, wants to go after different dreams and things like that. And I think I did get a little bit of that from him. He had big ideas and liked to be around people with big ideas and shoot the shit and whatever. And like I said, he always entertained people. And I remember having a really, almost like one of our better father-son, introspective conversations. And in the middle of it once, I said, Dad, if you could do anything in this world, for a living, what would it be? And he thought for a second, and he looked at me and he said, a comedian. And it just came so far out of the blue, and he was dead serious about it. And my first thought was, man, this is maybe when he was 50 or something like that. And I felt, honestly, I felt a little sad, because it's I always wanted him to pursue his dreams, and I was, in a weird way, sort of supportive of him in pursuing those dreams. And then after some reflection, I realized that's exactly what he did do. He just, he wasn't on stage per se, but he pretty much lived his life in that way as a comedian. And so, I think that we all have options to, we all have dreams and things like that. And I think we can live them, It doesn't have to be formalized all the time, but you can be into whatever you're into, and most of us are obviously into triathlon, and in your mind you can be, a pro triathlete even though you're not getting paid, but just have fun with it, and I guess keep the dream alive, So, but,
yeah, make it your dream.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, man. Well, check out our stuff at c26triathlon.com, the new website, and
come back. And this is, even though I think there's some immeasurable things you can take from this podcast if you choose to apply it. Again, hey, let's be honest, if you've made it to the very end of this podcast, you've got a heart and some patience, and we hope you got something positive out of it. But yeah, always dig back and go through. Next podcast will be How to Not Suck at Running 2.0, which I'm putting off for about a week. But listen, we both knew where today's topic was going to go, and deservedly and rightfully so. But yeah, we appreciate you all listening. Tune in again. Make sure you send out your best thoughts and vibes to both Mike and his mom, brother Chris, and I think your sister's name is Amy. And we will check you guys on Monday.
All right, he's C26coach@gmail. I'm Crushing Iron @gmail. If you want to get a hold of us.
That's right, yeah. And the website is c26triathlon.com.
All right, buddy. Thanks, Dad. Rest in peace. I love you, buddy. And Robbie, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, see you, buddy.